I had a request, or a question, asking what I thought about Dune. While I did give a short answer in the comments, I thought I would give a full answer in video since it is an interesting topic. So, Stilgar, if you are listening, this is for you. I did like the Dune books by Frank Herbert, and I have read all of them. I have also read the prequels and sequels that his son wrote. In my view, the quality of the series drops off after God Emperor of Dune. I did enjoy reading the books that Brian Herbert wrote, but they definitely have a different flavor, and I'm not sure he's really sticking to his father's vision, or even that his father would have wanted all those ideas to be included in the canon. While Frank Herbert had different beliefs than me, I get the impression that he did study history, and he did make some reasonable predictions about humanity, albeit gouged in a fictitious setting. I agree with some of the predictions that he made. First, if humanity ever does make it out into space, it's entirely possible that we would see a return to older and more naked power structures. Democratic government is an illusion, or at best, it's a temporary and transitory state. Demotism can abolish a government, but it cannot run a government in any sort of sustained fashion. A new ruling class always takes over and becomes rooted. People may think they have a democracy, when in fact they have an oligarchy, where they're only able to cast their votes between pre-approved choices. Right now, we already have property taxes, which is soft feudalism. A colonial government set up on another world might just choose to do away with all the illusions and pretenses. I imagine that if humans did move to another world, the de facto ruling class would be the leaders of the expedition. There might be some kind of vote, but it will only have as much effect as the current leaders allow. Far away from Earth, what would make the current leaders step down? Force, provided that there's the will and the ability to use it. So, in Dune, there is a hereditary ruling class, which is openly in charge. That is the oldest and most constant form of human government. The Atreides family is popular because they sincerely care about the people they rule over, which is rare both in the fictitious world and in the real world. They are the type of rulers which most people want but don't have, and mostly never will. Liet Kynes is surprised when Duke Leto Atreides cares more about saving the work crews than harvesting the spice, because his behavior was atypical when compared with the rest of the ruling class. Normally, the ruling class has a different set of concerns than the ruled, and looks after their own interests first. They only care about the people they rule inasmuch as they can use them to enrich and sustain themselves. They are like a fat glutton who continues to eat and eat far beyond the limits of his hunger, while others starve. So when the Atreides family is betrayed, it's all the more egregious. They are betrayed because the rest of the ruling class is more concerned about what they can take from Dune than what they can do for the people there. So I find the power structures in politics to be realistic and logical given the setting. Another prediction which I think is good is the use of swords in combat. During the Bronze Age of our own world, soldiers might have a bronze sword or a spear, but not much in the way of armor. Going into the Iron Age, more armor was added to compensate for the better weapons, and so on and so forth as people learned to make steel. A new weapon is created, which requires new armor, which in turn requires a better weapon to pierce it. When guns are invented, the armor gradually comes off because it is no longer practical. As guns improve, melee combat falls to the wayside. For a while, there is no armor at all, just uniforms so that both sides know who to shoot at and who not to shoot at. Eventually, armor is invented, which can stop shrapnel, and then bullets. Now we have soldiers wearing armor again, and supposedly some sort of full body armor is in the works. What comes after bullets? Projected energy weapons, and they are already in the works as well. I don't know how good the current body armor will be against energy weapons. My guess is that the next defense will be an energy field to either block or dampen the projected energy weapons. In the Dune series, soldiers are equipped with personal force fields. The force fields offer protection against objects moving above a certain velocity. Obviously, they can't offer protection against all movement, or the man inside would not be able to breathe. So a slower moving object such as a blade or a fist can get through at close distance. Therefore, melee combat has returned, and all the soldiers must learn to fight with swords again. I find this aspect both logical and plausible, and I don't think Frank Herbert put it in just as an excuse to have sword fights. Another aspect that I find very realistic is the prevalence of major corporations and monopolies and the way they interact with the government. The Spacing Guild has the monopoly on space travel, or at least travel faster than the speed of light, and they're determined to keep it. The government needs the guild to travel, but since the guild needs the spice in order to function, they are compelled to support the government. As a result, they are a significant political force, and they help the Carino family remain in power because they are the best at maintaining the flow of spice. The corporations look after their interest, the government looks after their interest, and they reinforce one another. Even after his revolution, Muad'Dib fails to break up this monstrous corporation, but he does manage to make them do his bidding for a time. The lack of computers I find to be a bit improbable, but it does make the Dune series unique. Once computers are introduced, it would be very hard to get people to give them up, and I don't think that Frank Herbert predicted the internet. One thing that could get people to give up computers is religion, which was the road Frank Herbert decided to take. In our world, we have the Amish, who don't use computers, or a lot of other modern conveniences. Of course, getting people who already believe in a religion to act a certain way is one thing. Getting new people into the religion is another. To accomplish this, the people who wanted to do away with the machines initiated the Butlerian Jihad, which to me indicates forced conversion. Finally, I want to talk about the physical appearances of the actual characters and discuss the possible roots of the prominent cultures. The Fremen definitely have Islamic origins, and so they should probably have a Middle Eastern appearance, but it is mentioned that some of them did have different hair colors. Therefore, it may be that they are actually descended from the tribes of Afghanistan, in which case we could expect to see different hair colors on occasion, albeit rarely. Cheney actually has red hair, but she is descended from an imperial scientist on her father's side. Since the Fremen are descended from Zinsuni wanderers, it is entirely possible that Frank Herbert had Afghanistan in mind. Afghanistan used to have a Buddhist presence, and there were still Buddhist monuments in Afghanistan when Frank Herbert was alive. Later they would be destroyed by the Taliban. It's possible that this is what gave him the idea to merge the two religions, and this might have been where the ancestors of the Fremen came from. As for the Atreides, I am not 100% certain, and I don't want to put words in Frank Herbert's mouth which he didn't intend, but it seems to me that they are supposed to be some sort of Mediterranean-derived people. Duke Leto Atreides, the first, is described as having an olive complexion and aquiline features. To me, that sounds like an Egyptian pharaoh. The pharaoh Akhenaten had very aquiline features, as an example. But I can't imagine Frank Herbert intended for Duke Leto to be so ugly. I think the Fayum mummy portraits are probably a more realistic picture of how the Atreides clan would look, in case anyone is having difficulty visualizing. The same facial features are passed down for the next two generations, at least, and Leto Atreides II rules in a style similar to the Egyptian pharaohs pretending to be a god king. The paternal origins of the Atreides family trace back to ancient Greece, and of this I am certain. In Children of Dune, it is mentioned that they are descended from the legendary King Agamemnon. In my version of the book, this can be found on page 60, and it occurs in the chapter when the vestige of Baron Harkonnen begins to take control of Alia. In Greek mythology, those descended from King Atreus of Mycenae are referred to collectively as Atreidi, hence the name Atreides. Just like their ancestors became legends, so did the Atreides of Dune. So my final thought on the Atreides is that they are of mixed Greek and Egyptian ancestry. I believe what Frank Herbert did is merge two of his favorite civilizations from antiquity into one family. As for the people of Caladan, it is stated in Appendix 2, The Religion of Dune, found in the back of Dune, that they have Islamic origins. They are probably a Middle Eastern-derived people, or at least a significant portion of their gene pool is. The Carino family, as well as the Harkonnens, seem to be of Indo-European origins, given their physical appearances. Since they have varying hair and eye colors coupled with light skin and Caucasoid features, it is unlikely that they could be anything else. Why mention all this about origin and physical appearance? Because there are people saying that we can't know how the different characters and cultures in Dune looked, and therefore any interpretation is acceptable. Well, we can know how they look because Frank Herbert describes them, and he also drops indicators as to their origins for people who are willing to read. When an author creates a character or culture, then he or she designs them exactly as he intends them to be. If someone else comes along later and changes that, then they are not fulfilling the original vision of the author, but rather piggybacking off of it. At least three different movie interpretations of Dune have been made, and all of them are wrong. In general, I am very intolerant and unaccepting when it comes to things that allege to be movie adaptations of books. I understand that most books are too long to fit into one movie, and that some things will have to be left out, but what troubles me is all the other things that end up getting added in. I start watching the movie expecting to get one thing and instead get something else. In other words, it's usually bait and switch. If you are making a real movie adaptation of a book, then the original sequence of events and ideas needs to be retained. No new concepts should be added. None. I think the producers like to add their own ideas in order to get attention to themselves. But I say that if your ideas are really good, then they should be able to stand alone, and there should be no need to impose them on someone else's work. It is true that getting attention for original works is difficult, but that's what all the successful authors did in the first place. Also, the inherent difficulties of marketing your own ideas is not an excuse to mangle someone else's work, and doesn't at all make it acceptable. So, coming to the movies. I would give the David Lynch movie a C if I were rating it just as a movie. However, as a book adaptation, I have to give it an F, maybe a 50. While the movie did have good visuals, there were silly elements introduced into the movie, I guess to make it look grim, or something, but instead, they just looked silly. Why would the Harkonnens give all their soldiers heart plugs? That's a serious weakness which could be too easily exploited, and the Harkonnens themselves could only utilize something like that while physically present. It is the most silly idea of a kill switch I have ever seen, and it was also not in the books. Why are the Bene Gesserit bald? That's not in the books, and their physical appearances are described in the books, so there's no excuse for this sort of thing. The idea that the Atreides were developing some sort of sonic weapon came completely out of nowhere and made me roll my eyes. I would also give the Sci-Fi Channel interpretation of Dune an F. I would give the Sci-Fi Channel adaptation of Children of the Dune a C as a book adaptation, and a B as a movie in general. I think the Sci-Fi Channel version followed the sequence of events a little better, and some of the visuals were good, but they didn't follow the physical descriptions of the characters very well. They also muffed the Fremen as far as their physical appearance goes. As for the latest Dune movie, I'm not even going to see it because it looks so bad. I wish people would stop with these movies if they aren't going to respect the source material. I think the best way to handle Dune would be to release it as an animated series or as pure CG. Granted, there is a lot of dialogue in the books, and much of the story is dialogue driven, but there are animes which have large sections of dialogue, and the kind of people who like Dune wouldn't be bothered by that. Dune is not for everyone, and it can't possibly be made accessible for everyone without destroying what it is.